Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you're engaging with the world of education, maybe as a parent or a concerned citizen, or perhaps, like me, an aspiring teacher still trying to figure it all out, you've definitely been in the great curriculum debate.
Oh, it's unavoidable.
Completely. We
Yeah.
spend so much time dissecting the frameworks,
Yeah.
should a child be in a school that follows CBSE or IB?
Right.
Are we trapped focusing too much on competitive exams, or should we be pushing for, like, concept-based, inquiry-driven learning?
These debates are important, don't get me wrong, but they can become a highly sophisticated distraction.
A distraction from what?
They pull all our attention toward the content, the structure, the tests, and, they pull us away from the one variable that really determines success. We analyze the script, but we almost never look at the actor.
As a trainee, that's something I struggle with all the time. I'm trying to connect the sort of philosophy of education with what actually happens in a classroom. I've read all the policy documents, but I feel like I'm still missing that central lever that actually moves the needle on learning.
And that's because it's not in the policy documents.
So what is that missing question, mentor?
It's the human factor. It's the invisible pillar that either holds up the entire structure or allows it to collapse. The real question is, who trained the teacher teaching your child today, and how recently?
Wow.
Our sources for this deep dive all confirm this core truth, and it's one that's often a bit uncomfortable to admit. A weak teacher operating within a great curriculum, a beautifully designed system like the IB or the NEP framework, will cause far, far more lasting damage.
Damage to a child's confidence, to their learning.
Exactly. More damage than a strong, committed teacher operating within an average or even an outdated system.
That just makes so much sense when you say it out loud. The great curriculum, the perfect policy. It's all just theory until it gets into the hands of a practitioner.
It's an idea.
We treat the curriculum like it's this guaranteed operating manual, but you're saying the manual is only as good as the mechanic who's actually using it.
Exactly right. A strong teacher can transform rote material into a genuine inquiry. They can find ways to make ancient history feel relevant or, basic math feel applicable.
And the weak teacher.
The weak teacher, on the other hand, can take the most engaging, inquiry-based curriculum and just reduce it to a predictable, fear-based worksheet routine.
So our mission today is to really get into that.
Yes. Our mission is to accept and explore this truth that we so often ignore. That curriculum quality is fundamentally and absolutely capped by teacher quality. We are going to dive deep into the training realities, the commitments, the promises, and the failures across the three main curricula, CBSE, state boards, and the IB model, to really understand what true accountability looks like on the ground.
Okay, so let's really unpack this idea that teacher quality just overrides the curriculum framework itself.
Yeah.
When I talk to parents, I see this pattern all the time. They choose schools based almost entirely on the board affiliation. They're comforted by the acronym. They rest on this assumption that, well, if the board is good, the teachers must be vetted and good. And I get it. I can see why they feel safe with that idea.
That assumption is probably the most dangerous blind spot in the entire educational ecosystem.
Why dangerous?
Because it allows mediocrity to hide in plain sight. It's sheltered by a globally recognized acronym. We have to remember, when we talk about boards, whether it's CBSE, a state board, or IB, we're talking about designers.
Right. They design the system.
They design the overarching frameworks, the assessment outlines, the subject scope, and the broad learning goals. But they do not stand in the classroom. They don't teach the children.
So the teacher is the essential translator of that design.
Precisely. The curriculum is static. The teacher is dynamic. A teacher translates those abstract frameworks, like the goal of critical thinking, for instance, into the daily classroom reality, the lived experience for a child, and the quality of that translation determines everything.
Everything.
Does the child truly understand Newton's laws, or can they just recite the formula when they're under pressure? A beautifully written syllabus sitting on a shelf in the school library has zero value if the teacher is unskilled or, frankly, unwilling to bring it to a vibrant, messy life.
I'm starting to realize that the most powerful, the most long-term impact a teacher has is it's completely separate from the official syllabus.
It is.
It's the psychological contract they make with the student.
And this is where the teacher holds absolute power, and it's where we need to focus our attention. Just think for a moment about the powerful non-syllabus factors they manage.
Yeah.
These are things that fundamentally shape the learning environment, and they're not dictated by any board. First, the classroom climate.
Safety versus anxiety.
Is the teacher creating a space of intellectual safety where a half-formed idea is celebrated? Or is it a space of constant anxiety where mistakes are punished and, silence is rewarded?
And if that safety isn't there, genuine learning it stops.
It grinds to a halt.
The child starts to prioritize self-preservation over curiosity.
Absolutely. Secondly, the teacher controls the balance between fear and curiosity. Do they use surprise tests and aggressive discipline to motivate? Or do they cultivate a genuine internal curiosity in the child?
The pace of learning, too.
Yes, the pace of learning delivery. The textbook might say 2 weeks for a complex historical period, but the teacher is the one who decides if the class just races through it for the sake of completion or if they pause for that necessary detour.
Into a complex ethical debate or something like
Which
that.
is what actually builds the application skills.
And you mentioned the treatment of mistakes. That feels huge to me.
Oh, it's crucial. They control how student mistakes are treated and used. Is a mistake just marked in red ink as a permanent failure? Or is it treated as a rich data point?
A signpost.
The signpost.
Yeah.
Showing exactly where the concept broke down, allowing for immediate corrective feedback. And the cumulative effect of all these subtle daily decisions is what dictates whether a child feels empowered to speak up, to share a tentative, half-formed thought,
Or whether they just stay silent, waiting for the right answer to be handed to them.
Exactly.
So, if a board like the CBSE mandates a big shift toward critical thinking and application, but the individual teacher in the classroom treats every mistake punitively, they're actively sabotaging that mandate.
They are. The policy becomes irrelevant in that moment.
The policy is instantly superseded by the pedagogy.
Which is why we have to look at what I call the same board, different outcomes paradox.
Okay.
Take 2 schools. Both are affiliated with the same board, let's say CBSE, or a state board in the same city. They use the same syllabus, the same insert books, and their students all sit for the exact same centralized examinations.
So on paper, they are identical institutions.
Identical, and yet their outputs can be fundamentally divergent. In School A, the core pedagogical environment driven by the teacher's ongoing training and their mindset is geared toward genuine understanding. It produces confident, reflective learners who know how to learn and, more importantly, how to question.
In School B.
In School B, the environment is geared toward...
But, mentor, doesn't the board hold the school accountable for teacher standards? I mean, why is there such a massive gap?
That gap exists because accountability often ends at the paperwork. Boards, especially large national ones, they simply cannot micromanage every single classroom, and parents are missing the critical accountability questions.
What are they asking instead?
They ask, which board? Or what are your facilities? They forget to ask, how are your teachers trained every single year beyond their BE degree?
And crucially, who observes their teaching practice? I heard from friends that in many places, observation is purely administrative. It's a quick tick box exercise, not formative at all.
We need to define those terms really clearly because this is where the money is either spent or wasted. Administrative observation is just checking a box.
Did the teacher show up on time? Did they cover the chapter?
Exactly. It's evaluation tied to bureaucratic compliance or maybe even salary increments. Formative observation is entirely different. It's observation focused on growth, followed by immediate structured coaching and mentorship.
It's asking a different question.
It asks, how can we help you, the teacher, become more effective at implementing this new skill we're asking for, like inquiry?
That distinction is vital. One is about compliance. The other is about quality improvement.
And this leads to the most important question that parents should be asking. What specific documented mechanisms are in place to correct outdated methods?
Right.
If a teacher hasn't fundamentally updated their methodology since the 1990s, how is the school proactively ensuring they align with modern competency goals?
The silence on those questions.
The silence, the lack of parental demand for proof of internal coaching is what creates long-term systemic educational damage. A school can purchase the curriculum, but the parent must demand proof of the delivery system's quality control.
Okay, let's focus now on the CBSE system. It's the largest national framework, and it's going through this tremendous upheaval right now, especially with the National Education Policy, the NEP. As a trainee, I see all these documents advocating for a total overhaul. So what are the training mechanisms the board is providing to support this huge policy shift?
Well, the intent is certainly there. And the framework has progressed significantly from, say, a few decades ago. CBSE, working with NSERT, provides a pretty robust, policy-driven structure.
Like what, specifically?
This includes orientation programs for every curriculum change, extensive online training modules, which are often mandatory, that cover pedagogical shifts, and specialized workshops focusing specifically on the new mandates of the NEP.
And what exactly does the NEP mandate in terms of teaching? What's the core idea?
At its heart, the NEP emphasizes a shift toward competency-based education.
Okay.
This means moving away from just testing what a student remembers and toward testing what a student can do with that knowledge.
So critical thinking, real-world application.
Problem solving, socio-emotional learning, all of it. There's also a very strong focus on assessment reform, making tests more holistic and reliant on high-stakes rote memorization. So yes, the board is sending a very clear message. Adapt, facilitate, and focus on application.
The tools and the policy directives, they sound undeniably strong. But you've hinted that there's a massive transformation gap. Where does the system break down between that policy memo and the reality of the classroom?
The breakdown happens at the point of implementation, and it's driven by a deep psychological inertia. Despite the availability of all these online modules and workshops, what we frequently see in the classroom is a reversion. Teachers default to teaching as they themselves were taught 10, 20, even 30 years ago. And this isn't laziness, it's a survival mechanism.
You said inertia, but what causes the teacher to revert like that?
Okay, imagine this. A teacher is required to attend a 3-day training session on integrating technology into learning an important competency. But then they return to a class of 50 students with no follow-up, no coaching, no performance review tied to that skill.
So they just go back to what's easiest.
They revert to the most efficient, least risky method. The tech integration training might mean they now use the projector, but maybe only to display the attendance list, rather than to facilitate dynamic interactive learning.
So the old habits persist.
Persistent issues remain. The dominant lecture culture, the survival of fear-based discipline where quiet compliance is prioritized, and the substitution of genuine, messy inquiry with routine, predictable worksheets.
That is such a profound distinction. The worksheet becomes the substitute for application. It gives the appearance of critical thinking without requiring any real facilitation skill from the teacher.
Exactly. And the core insight we have to grasp is that simply ensuring training attendance does not equal training transformation.
Right.
A teacher can tick the box saying they completed the module on competency-based education, but without ongoing in-school, weekly guided practice and mentorship. Without continuous feedback applying those concepts, they will revert to their comfortable methodology the moment a complex situation or, classroom chaos arises.
And that connects directly to the competency gap, doesn't it?
Yeah.
CBSE is asking for this dramatic shift from content mastery to facilitation mastery.
A huge shift.
They want critical thinking. But if the teacher themselves was only trained for content delivery, syllabus coverage, and rote mastery, that's a huge skill mismatch. They're experts in the what, but suddenly they need to be experts in the how.
This creates profound professional insecurity. Think about the challenge. A teacher might be a genius in their subject, say mathematics, but they're now being asked to facilitate a collaborative, open-ended problem where the students might reach multiple correct answers via different pathways.
That requires surrendering control.
It requires the teacher to surrender control of the information flow and to manage unpredictability. Their old training focused on ensuring the right answer was efficiently delivered. The new demand is managing the process of discovery.
And how does that insecurity manifest in the everyday classroom? What does it look like?
It manifests as pedagogical rigidity. When a teacher feels insecure about managing a complex, discussion-based activity or an application task, they tighten the reins.
They shut down questions.
They become intolerant of deviation, less accepting of questions that fall outside the immediate scope of the content, and they retreat into the safety of the textbook. They rely heavily on standardized testing and efficiency drills to validate their method because those are the measures they understand and control. This rigidity is a defense mechanism against uncomfortable pedagogical change.
We have to acknowledge the foundation here, though. CBSE teachers often possess immense strengths, especially in a system that demands such high performance in national exams. Where do they truly excel?
We must maintain a balanced perspective. The system produces high achievers for a reason. Many CBSE teachers demonstrate real excellence, especially in the senior secondary classes.
Okay.
They possess strong subject depth and content knowledge. They are masters of their domain, which is vital. They are often highly proficient in effective classroom control, meaning they can manage very large groups efficiently to deliver a core syllabus.
An exam prep.
Yes. They excel at efficient syllabus completion and achieving high proficiency in exam preparedness, which, in the Indian context, is a necessary skill for a student to navigate the next step of their educational journey.
So their challenge isn't a lack of knowledge. It's the difficulty of translating that deep content knowledge into modern, application-based, student-centered pedagogy, especially when the school fails to provide that consistent coaching.
Precisely. And this is why CBSE teacher quality is so highly variable. It's determined not by the board's name, but by the individual school's culture of continuous professional development and accountability. CBSE provides the vehicle. The school decides whether to keep the engine rigorously maintained.
Which brings us back to the actionable questions for CBSE parents. If the school is the real determinant of quality, what specifically must parents demand in terms of teacher training accountability?
Parents have to demand a level of transparency that moves beyond the promises in the brochure.
So not just do you train your teachers?
No. Ask how frequently they undergo refresher training. And is that training specific to pedagogy, how they teach, or just content updates, what they teach?
And about observation?
Secondly, demand clarity on classroom observation. Is it routine? Is it formative? Does it lead to coaching and improvement? Or is it merely symbolic, just checked off a compliance list? Ask specifically to see the observation format.
And the final, toughest question.
Finally, parents have to push. What is the specific, documented process for identifying and proactively correcting outdated pedagogical methods? If the school's leadership can't clearly articulate a plan for coaching a struggling teacher back into modern practice, then stagnation is passively being allowed to flourish.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the state boards. This is, arguably the most critical and complex sector. It covers vast populations with just immense diversity in resources, geography, and language.
It's a huge undertaking.
What is the typical reality regarding professional development and teacher training within many of these state board systems?
The state board reality often involves significant, deep-seated structural challenges. These are rooted in scale and inconsistent funding.
So the PD, the professional development, is affected.
It's frequently infrequent. It often occurs only during these massive, centralized, impersonal cycles that might happen once a year or even less. Content updates can lag significantly behind modern national standards because the curriculum reform process is just slow and complex to implement across millions of students and teachers.
So pedagogical reform, the actual change in how teaching happens, is slow-moving and top-down.
Very slow. Which means it can take years for the spirit of progressive educational policies to filter down to the everyday classroom reality, and this forces the teacher to operate in a kind of vacuum.
Relying on what they already know.
They rely heavily on personal experience teaching, exactly as they have always taught. Rigid adherence to notes from their own B.ED training years ago, and unquestioning use of previous exam patterns. They are not empowered or expected to engage in continuous professional learning because the system often fails to prioritize it, budget for it, or track it consistently.
The state board teacher is often the most resource-constrained professional, yet they manage the largest student populations. What is this specific hidden cost that this training gap imposes on the learners, the students who are often silently adapting to these suboptimal conditions?
The cost is profound. You see the immediate effect. A high prevalence of outdated teaching methods. It's characterized by an overwhelming emphasis on memorization and recall, often because the teacher fears their students will fail the centralized, content-heavy exam if they stray from rote instruction.
So there's very little inquiry-based learning.
Minimal exposure to it. Not because the teacher doesn't want to do it, but because they lack the specific facilitation skills and the classroom resources required.
And what about differentiation? That's essential for a large, diverse classroom.
Exactly. You see low levels of differentiation to meet diverse student needs, as the training focuses on a single, standardized approach teaching to the middle of the class.
And the feedback.
And most damaging of all is the weak or non-existent feedback culture. Feedback is solely tied to marks and comparison, rather than being formative and focused on growth. And the children, they adapt silently.
How so?
They learn that questioning isn't efficient, that the fastest, safest route to success is compliance and regurgitation. They become passive recipients, which limits their conceptual dexterity, even if they manage to scrape together high scores.
That sense of resignation is just heartbreaking. But we have to be careful not to paint the entire sector with one broad brush. What are the undeniable strengths and the profound positive attributes of many state board teachers that parents need to recognize?
Their dedication is often unmatched. They possess a deep personal commitment to their students, often viewing their work as a vital community service, not just a salary.
They're deeply connected to their communities.
Deeply rooted. They have an intimate knowledge of their local communities and contexts. They know the specific challenges, the economic realities, the family backgrounds facing their students. That is invaluable for holistic teaching.
They also stay in their jobs for a long time.
Yes, they offer high levels of stability and long-term tenure within schools, providing consistent cultural anchors for the students over many years.
So they have the heart, the dedication, and the local insight.
They do. And the critical insight for us as mentors and trainees is this. These committed teachers demonstrate a powerful capacity for adaptation, provided, and this is a big provided, they receive appropriate support, consistent exposure to modern pedagogy, and reliable mentoring.
That's a powerful idea.
A teacher with deep knowledge of her community, who is then trained in inquiry-based learning, can implement that learning in a far more relevant and impactful local context than a newly arrived, globally trained teacher who lacks that community history. The potential for transformation is immense if the support is given.
Okay, so since change from the top down is so slow in these systems, how can parents actually initiate and drive improvement from the bottom up? What are some concrete, empowering examples of parent advocacy that can bypass the bureaucracy?
Change in state systems often begins with parent insistence and community organization, not waiting for a new policy. Parents have to move from complaining about a lack of quality to proactively funding and organizing solutions.
What would that look like?
For example, parents can collectively request and organize specific teacher workshops by pooling their resources. They can partner with local educational NGOs that specialize in teacher development, bringing external modern expertise into the school ecosystem.
They could also actively support specific school-level training budgets. Maybe designate funds away from, say, a new facade or something symbolic, and explicitly direct them towards sustained, substantive professional development.
That's a practical, high-impact move. They can also initiate structured dialogues with the administration. Instead of vague complaints, they can collectively document specific learning concerns. Our children are struggling to apply math concepts to real-world problems and present a proposed solution, like funding a trainer for 2 weekends on competency-based math facilitation.
So a unified, solution-oriented voice.
When the community speaks with that kind of voice, the local administration is much more likely to prioritize resources for teacher development because they know they have parental support and monitoring. In these systems, change frequently flows bottom-up, driven by local necessity and a clear community vision.
Now let's turn our attention to the IB model now. It's often held up as the sort of gold standard for continuous professional learning and rigorous accountability. What is the fundamental principle that forces this high level of teacher training commitment within the IB framework?
The foundational principle is really a philosophical necessity. The IB curriculum is concept-based, context-driven, and focused entirely on global perspectives and inquiry. The IB organization understands that it is mathematically impossible to successfully run inquiry-based, highly reflective classrooms with untrained teachers. Inquiry is not a default teaching mode. It is a sophisticated facilitation skill that must be learned, practiced, and mastered.
So the complexity of the curriculum itself demands the complexity of the training. If the student has to be a critical, reflective thinker, then the teacher must be a highly trained facilitator of that process.
Precisely. This understanding makes mandatory, regular, and often expensive professional development a necessity. The training is structured around category-based workshops specific to the teacher's role, whether they're a program coordinator, a subject teacher, or an internal examiner.
And it's constant.
There are ongoing curriculum updates that require immediate retraining and formal, structured evaluation cycles to ensure the school remains compliant. The training isn't supplemental. It's an integral, non-negotiable part of the accreditation itself.
As a trainee, I'm feeling overwhelmed just hearing about the demands.
Yeah.
Can you detail what this commitment looks like in practice? It sounds like IB teachers are just in perpetual training.
They essentially are. Teaching within the IB framework is treated not as a routine job, but as a highly accountable profession with continuous certification requirements.
So they have to attend official workshops.
Teachers must attend specific official IB workshops, which historically were often regional or global, to ensure a standardized understanding across the world.
And they have to be certified for every single program, right? Not just once.
Yes, that's vital. The IB has 3 main programs. The Primary Years Program, or PYP, the Middle Years Program, MYP, and the Diploma Program, DP. A teacher can't just teach across all three with one certificate.
Why not?
Each program has specific pedagogical demands, assessment philosophies, and curriculum models. PYP focuses on transdisciplinary learning. DP is highly specialized and focused on university preparation. Retraining and specific program certification are mandatory for each level they teach.
And the curriculum itself is always changing.
It evolves, which means mandatory curriculum recertification is standard practice every few years.
And this emphasis on reflective practice, how does that translate into accountability on the ground?
It forces continuous internal refinement. IB teachers are expected to constantly reflect, to document their learning objectives, and to share evidence of how their methods are translating into student learning outcomes. They use internal assessments and program evaluation cycles. This documentation forces them to move beyond just covering content and instead focus on demonstrating impact.
So if it's not working, they have to change it.
If a teacher can't show reflective evidence that their inquiry unit actually worked, they will be coached to change their approach. It's built into the system.
This high level of accountability and continuous learning, it must inevitably come with some significant economic trade-offs that parents and school leaders need to understand. What are those practical consequences?
Well, the primary trade-off is the cost, and that cost drives up tuition. Mandatory, high-quality global training significantly increases a school's operating costs.
What are they paying for?
You're paying for the workshops, the travel, the accommodation, the curriculum royalties, and most importantly, the specialized time teachers spend away from the classroom in training. Parents are paying a substantial premium for the mandatory, continuous upkeep of the teaching staff.
And what about the stability of the staff? That must be an issue.
That is the second major trade-off. Increased teacher mobility and potential turnover. A well-trained, certified IB teacher becomes a highly skilled specialist who is globally employable.
I see.
Once they're certified in a niche curriculum like the DP or the PYP, they can easily relocate to international schools across the world. For the school, this creates a retention risk. The better the school is at professional development, the higher the risk that their newly minted excellent teacher will be headhunted by a school offering a better package somewhere else.
So the school has to keep investing just to stand still.
They must continuously invest in recruitment and training just to mitigate the turnover caused by their own successful PD program.
So since structure doesn't eliminate failure, where does the system break down, even with all these mandates?
High structure just shifts the location of the failure. IB classrooms fail when school administrations try to cut corners on the mandated PD budget.
For example,
They might only send a single coordinator to a workshop and then expect that one person to train 50 subject teachers back at school. That just dilutes the quality of the certification entirely. Failure also occurs when the principle of genuine, rigorous inquiry is misconstrued as unstructured freedom or just chaos. Inquiring requires intense preparation and structure. Without that training, it collapses into purposeless activity.
And I imagine the high administrative demand must contribute to teacher burnout.
Absolutely. The structural demands are immense high-stakes reporting, constant reflection, mandatory global attendance, managing internal assessments alongside external exams. This leads to profound teacher burnout, which immediately compromises the quality of facilitation. A burnt-out teacher cannot be an effective, curious, or reflective mentor.
They become rigid and defensive.
Exactly. For the IB model to work, the PD has to be sustained and substantive, and the school must invest equally in teacher wellness and support.
So, if a parent is choosing an IB school, what does that brand truly guarantee regarding the teacher standing in front of their child?
The IB model guarantees high system accountability. It guarantees that official processes for retraining, for necessary correction mechanisms, and for curriculum updates exist. It guarantees that the teacher has been exposed to the philosophical and pedagogical demands of the curriculum.
But it doesn't guarantee a great teacher.
It does not guarantee great teachers. Quality depends entirely on how seriously the individual school respects and implements those non-negotiable mechanisms. A school committed to the spirit of the IB will produce exceptional, reflective teachers. A school committed only to the marketing of the IB will eventually fail to maintain the rigorous standards. The delivery system is always, always paramount. #OutroWay.
This deep dive mentor has just fundamentally shifted my perspective. I've gone from engaging in these, philosophical curriculum debates to demanding practical delivery accountability.
Good.
The curriculum, CBSE, state, or IB, is just the theoretical framework. The teacher is the critical delivery system.
And if that delivery system is undertrained, unsupported, or rigid, the entire framework collapses, regardless of its original elegance or progressive intent. The success of every single educational shift, from competency-based education in the CBSE to inquiry learning in the IB, rests squarely on the shoulders of the individuals standing in front of the classroom.
As the learner, the aspiring teacher, and the concerned community member, this is the most critical, actionable takeaway for me. I need a checklist, a list of specific questions I have to commit to asking in any educational environment. What's the final, provocative list of non-negotiables we must hold schools accountable for?
You need to ask the questions that expose the school's true, budgeted commitment level. Move beyond the vague statements.
Okay, first one.
Firstly, regarding training. How is annual pedagogical teacher training budgeted, assessed, and implemented? Is it optional and tokenistic, or is it mandatory, sustained over time, and specific to the skills needed for modern pedagogy?
Secondly, addressing that human element we discussed with IB and burnout, which has to apply everywhere. How does the school handle teacher burnout, stress management, and proactively support staff wellness?
Because a teacher who is overwhelmed and unsupported quickly reverts to rigid, fear-based teaching.
Right.
Then, the essential quality control mechanism. What are the formalized, formative procedures for observing and mentoring teachers? Demand to know if there is dedicated, scheduled time for peer review, coaching, and non-evaluative feedback that's focused purely on growth.
And finally, the question that forces change.
How are outdated teaching methodologies actively addressed, corrected, and phased out? If a school can't articulate a clear, proactive correction plan, a pathway for continuous pedagogical improvement, they are passively allowing stagnation and inefficiency to corrupt the curriculum.
Boards write policies.
But teachers write destinies. The primary focus must always be on the training, the empowerment, and the conscious development of the person guiding your child. When you choose an educational path, you are choosing a framework, but you are investing in a human being's professional capacity. Ask first, who is teaching my child and who is training that teacher to meet the demands of tomorrow? That is the only question that truly matters.